Hello, welcome to my video community building and fundraising. This will be the first video in a series on the topic where we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into community building and why it's important for a nonprofit and especially for your individual giving. So this is an edited version of a live stream that I did, and I do live streams about once a week. So if you find value in this video, you can go over to LinkedIn and connect with me there, or you can subscribe to this YouTube channel, and those ways you'll get notifications of the live streams where you can join me and connect with me there. I would love to have you comment on this video to hear how you implement community building at your nonprofit and how it's impacting your fundraising. Enjoy the video. I hear a lot about community building and people talk about it, about, the importance of it and why nonprofits need to invest in it. But I don't hear a lot of the practical things, and talk about it all we want. But unless we really understand what this is and understand how to actually do it within our organizations, it's not going to be helpful. And I highlighted a couple of the points that I thought were most relevant in terms of what community is and what community building is. So I highlighted it's sharing common interests and perspectives. It's a sense of coherence and identity that comes with acting together. And there is a huge component to it that is social ties. And we know that if you think about the communities that you're a part of, this is a pretty big component. But he was talking about what community is sort of differentiated between a group of people who are an audience versus those who are actually have those social ties, those social connections. So I put an asterisk next to the two there. There's a couple in the middle. And again, this is in the context of a company, like a for-profit company, probably to just thinking of it from a marketing perspective. But I think we can apply this when we're also thinking about nonprofits. There's lots of ways you can sort of like redefine those terms just slightly or tweak them just slightly so that they completely apply. And I think this is a really important thing to think about too, because when you've got a nonprofit, there's often people who are newsletter subscribers. They follow you on social media. Those are kind of like those loose connections. And I think it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking and assuming that this is your community, when really it's just your audience. It's sort of like that mass big group that is maybe ill-defined in some aspects that you're talking to, that you're sharing your message with. And they haven't really moved down that path towards supporting your organization necessarily. Community building is reflected in a lot of the standard practices of a nonprofit. And where you will see that most is in the cultivation and stewardship practices. So you see these strategies that are intended to build trust, intended to deepen relationships and connections. So that, sharing information about your work, providing volunteer opportunities, having events where people come together and you can gather and socialize, creating these meaningful experiences for people to engage with your nonprofit that's related to your mission. These are cultivation and stewardship practices. So it's nothing new. But I think it's important to think of it less in terms of cultivation and stewardship and more in terms of this more holistic community building piece. And this is an article that I found, an AFP Global article I found, and it is called Back to Basics, Building a Strong Community of Support for Your Nonprofit. It's a couple of years old, and I will link to it, but I thought it was a really great overview in terms of community building for nonprofits. Again, one of the few that I've been able to find right now. So in the article, they say building community gives supporters more ways to contribute to a nonprofit besides just donating. And also, these activities will keep your organization front of mind. So somebody's involved, of course, they're going to be thinking of you often. Supporters who have deeper connections to your nonprofit will reliably support your organization through easy and difficult times. And here are some examples they give of community building activities. So they've got events, advocacy campaigns, volunteer opportunities, that online community. And then also an interesting point they had here was products and services, which I hadn't really thought of as community building. And I might explore that a little bit further in another live stream. But so the examples they have here are courses, merchandise, exclusive materials. I think that's a different way to connect with people. You're probably tapping into something a little bit different than a philanthropic interest, but that's an interesting one. The point is that people, by engaging in these activities, they're going to be feeling connected. They feel that sense of purpose, that sense of belonging. And I want to point out here that this is something that nonprofits, of course, have been doing for a very long time, both strategically, intentionally, and also just naturally, organically. You may notice as well that it's a tactic and a strategy that is becoming more prevalent and more important as well in the for-profit and business community. And this is something, this community building strategy, because people are beginning to understand more and more how these social bonds and group dynamics influence consumer behavior and encourage people to spend more resources on the thing that you want them to. Profit organizations are really tapping into this. So it is a proven method for gaining affinity between individuals and organizations. So it's really important, I think, for nonprofits to maintain that and to understand that profits and understand also the strength they have in this area, because we are natural conveners. We have enormous opportunity to give people a chance to build relationships on a pretty grassroots individual level with causes that are important to them, and with work that's also important to them. So building community, it's about understanding how to engage with the people who are supporting you in long term. So that's individual donors, people who are sustaining donors, and that's the word I use for major donors, and also monthly donors, people who give on an ongoing basis. This group is incredibly important, and not to downplay the importance of other revenue streams. I have been a grant writer for many, many years, so I understand the importance, especially for a nonprofit, that grant revenue, government funding revenue is. But I highly encourage nonprofits to focus on and build their individual donor base. The funding is generally unrestricted. It's flexible funding. It is scalable, which means that you can build on what you already have. If your need is growing, it's easier for you to build on that stream of funding coming in. It's also more resilient in that there are more components to your individual donor base than, say, your foundation donor base. If you've got 5 major donors in your foundation funding and one of them goes away, which happens all the time, it is going to be harder to make up for that than if 5 of your individual donors go away, which also happens all the time. These are pie charts that I pulled off of the CRA website. They are Canadian nonprofits, and it's just the money that they reported coming in, going out every year. It's really easy, and everybody can access these. But I like to look at these to illustrate sort of like the different models of funding and how and why individual funding is so important. So the first organization that we're looking at, you can see blue is from gifts from other registered charities, and that basically means gifts from foundations. They've also got government funding, and you can see that for this organization, it makes that this funding makes up a massive, significant part of their overall revenue picture. The receipted donations and non-receipted donations are these two right here. So those are typically individual donors and also corporate donations that are not sponsorships. Imagine if this blue went away. Like, this organization is going to be in big trouble. Flip to this organization who has, and I'm not showing this, but on the expense side, you can see that they have invested a significant amount in their fundraising, which means they are actively fundraising to individual people. Their receipted donations and non-receipted donations make up half. And the government funding and foundation funding is a tiny slice. So it is important to have all of these things going on, but I think also pretty critical and vital to be building up this red slice, because this is the piece that's going to keep you going for years and years. And if we go through another thing like the pandemic, we go through these recessions, it's a more resilient piece of funding than this blue piece. If you're a nonprofit and you want to build a fundraising program that brings in unrestricted funding, that brings in scalable funding, like I said, funding that you can build upon, I would encourage you to focus on individual donors. If you're focusing on individual donors, you need to have community building as a piece. As we have seen, it builds connection, it creates purpose, it creates a sense of belonging. So these two things go hand in hand, that flexible funding piece, the community building piece. And aside from that, community building, there's we didn't really even touch on this. There are so many other benefits to it other than just fundraising for your organization. So you're really putting a positive thing into the world. You're contributing to the fabric of society. And I think there's a much more, there are noble benefits as well to community building that don't just impact the revenue of your organization. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I am live streaming every Friday, and I think for the next little while, I'm going to be diving into community building a little bit more. So if this is something you're interested in, I would encourage you to attend or watch the replays. And then I'll also be linking to my newsletter sign up. I send out a newsletter every other week. It's called Fundraising from the Ground Up. And I talk about things like community building, but also more sort of like tactical fundraising things, especially for small nonprofits. And especially in regards to individual giving, annual giving, monthly giving, all those things. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.